Hello and welcome back to the Military Time. Today, we bring you the latest and most detailed updates on the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia, a war that has reshaped global politics, military strategies, and humanitarian priorities since its full-scale escalation in 2022. What began as a regional confrontation has now evolved into one of the most complex and prolonged wars of the modern era, with no clear end in sight. In the last few weeks, both sides have intensified their operations on multiple fronts. Ukrainian forces continue to push for territorial recovery in the east and south, while Russian troops have launched fresh offensives aimed at regaining lost ground and exhausting Ukrainian defenses. The fighting remains fierce along the Donetsk, Kharkiv, and Zaporizhia front lines, where artillery duels, drone warfare, and night assaults have become the defining features of this grinding conflict. Reports from the battlefield indicate that Ukrainian forces have made limited advances near the strategic town of Avdiivka, despite heavy bombardment and waves of Russian attacks. The area remains one of the most contested zones, with both sides suffering significant losses. Meanwhile, in the southern direction near Robotyne and Tokmak, Ukrainian units are reportedly using advanced Western-supplied equipment, including U.S.-made Bradley infantry vehicles and Leopard tanks, to hold their positions under continuous Russian fire. On the Russian side, Moscow's strategy appears to have shifted toward attrition, focusing on wearing down Ukraine's manpower and resources rather than rapid territorial gains. Russian artillery and air forces have been pounding Ukrainian infrastructure, energy systems, and supply lines, particularly as the winter season approaches. Drones and cruise missiles have once again become central to Russia's campaign, targeting energy grids and defense industries in Kiev, Lviv, and Odessa. Ukrainian air defense systems, including the U.S.-made Patriot and German Iris-T units, have intercepted the majority of these strikes, but some have still managed to cause severe damage and civilian casualties. The use of drones continues to redefine the battlefield. Both sides have expanded their fleets of kamikaze and reconnaissance drones, with Ukraine increasing its use of domestically produced Baba Yaga and Beaver drones capable of striking deep inside Russian territory. In response, Russia has deployed new generations of Lancet drones, which have been devastatingly effective against Ukrainian armor and artillery units. The skies over the front lines are now filled with unmanned aerial vehicles, making every movement visible and every position vulnerable. Internationally, the geopolitical ripple effects of this war remain intense. Western nations continue to pledge military and financial aid to Ukraine, though political divisions in both Europe and the United States have slowed new assistance packages. Washington has approved additional military funding and is preparing another delivery of ammunition, armored vehicles, and precision-guided systems, while European allies such as Germany, Poland, and the UK are reinforcing their long-term commitments. At the same time, Russia is expanding its partnerships with countries like Iran, North Korea, and China. Intelligence sources claim that Moscow has been receiving artillery shells and ballistic missiles from North Korea, as well as Shahd series drones from Iran, deals that are helping sustain Russia's offensive capabilities. Meanwhile, Western officials warn that China's dual-use exports could indirectly be supporting Russia's war industry, despite Beijing's public stance of neutrality. The human cost of this conflict continues to rise dramatically. The United Nations estimates that tens of thousands of civilians have been killed or injured since the start of the war, and millions have been displaced across Europe. Cities like Mariupol, Bakhmut, and Severodonetsk remain in ruins, symbols of destruction and resilience. The humanitarian crisis is deepening as winter draws near, with power shortages, food insecurity, and the collapse of healthcare facilities in several regions under constant bombardment. On the diplomatic front, there appears to be no breakthrough in sight. Talks remain frozen, and both Kiev and Moscow insist on conditions that are currently unacceptable to the other side. Ukraine continues to demand a full withdrawal of Russian forces from all occupied territories, including Crimea, while Russia insists on recognition of the territories it has annexed. International mediators, including Turkey, China, and the United Nations, have periodically attempted to restart dialogue, but each attempt has fallen short amid ongoing military escalation. Inside Ukraine, morale remains high despite the hardship. President Volodymyr Zelensky continues to rally international support and maintain unity at home, regularly visiting frontline positions and addressing global summits. Ukrainian engineers are racing to rebuild critical infrastructure before the harsh winter sets in. However, fatigue among soldiers and civilians alike is becoming more visible, with the prolonged conflict testing the limits of endurance. In Russia, the Kremlin continues to frame the war as a defensive operation against NATO expansion, bolstering domestic support through media control and nationalistic messaging. President Vladimir Putin recently announced increased production of military hardware and promised to strengthen Russia's defense industries. Moscow claims it has successfully adapted to Western sanctions, with its economy showing resilience through trade with non-Western partners. Still, analysts suggest that long-term strain is inevitable, especially as the cost of war spending continues to rise. The question on everyone's mind is what happens next. As both armies dig in for the winter months, experts believe that the tempo of operations may temporarily slow but will not stop. Ukraine is expected to focus on rebuilding its logistics, training new brigades, and preparing for renewed offensives in the spring. Russia, meanwhile, is likely to continue its relentless missile strikes and seek incremental gains along the front lines, testing Ukraine's air defenses and supply chains. This war has become more than a military conflict. It's a test of political will, industrial capacity, and the endurance of nations. The outcome may not be decided by a single battle, but by the ability of each side to sustain pressure, adapt to technological changes, and keep international support aligned. For now, both Kiev and Moscow remain locked in a cycle of attack and retaliation, with no sign of compromise. The world watches closely as the war grinds on, reshaping global alliances, energy markets, and military doctrines for years to come. As we continue to monitor the situation, the Military Time will bring you verified updates, expert analysis, and real-time reports from across the conflict zone. Stay tuned for our next detailed breakdown as we track how the Ukraine-Russia war evolves through the winter and what it could mean for global security in 2025. Thank you for watching. This has been the Military Time, your trusted source for international defense and war analysis. Stay informed, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next report.